Today, we'd like to share some important concepts on cybercrime and methods and tools to help investigate that kind of crime and to deter it. One of the issues and one of the difficulties in cybercrime today is that there is a convergence between telecom and information technologies. There's transnational, there's international communication. There's highly organized and crime rings and other organizations that are coming at systems from different directions in different methods. One of the key problems is that there's really limits in investigation. It takes quite a bit of power and quite a bit of advanced tools to be able to investigate and actually monitor and detect these kinds of crimes and these kinds of problems. Here's an example of a very complex international network where there could be criminal rings in one area, for example, in China, or there might be a criminal ring in another totally different country, and they may be cooperating to try to swindle or do some sort of a crime in a third country. And so it's very, very difficult to analyze this kind of globalized cyber crime and actually to trace it back and actually find the source and then actually prosecute. So it needs some very advanced tools to cover this kind of complex problem and assist in managing and capturing it and deterring it. Cybercrime is not limited to one country. Every country has cybercrime. In the United States, in many other countries, basically every country has cybercrime. In a case where the country has more computers and more online applications, more online companies, there's probably going to be more cybercrime. Cybercrime can cover all kinds of things, from ATM kind of crime to IT systems to home PCs to any sort of thing. And then cybercrime is also multinational. So that means you might see a lot of cybercrime for example, in China, but that crime may also be related to other countries as well. And so it takes some very powerful advanced tools to catch and detect these kinds of problems. Okay, one of the problems is that there are so many new technologies that are emerging. Everyone knows that there's internet crime, but now there's web pads, there's mobile phones. People use their iPhone or their mobile phone for credit card purchases. People use these little web pads to access the websites and actually buy things or do some sort of transactions. And so there's all sorts of crime that relates to the mobile devices. There's employees in a company that they bring their mobile phone. Their mobile phone has wireless. They can access the company's networks. So there's a high degree of new technologies that are portable, where that either employees or visitors or criminals can enter some area and use portable tools to access other networks. And then there's a much higher level of technical skill. Even the average employee knows how to take a USB flash and plug it into a system and copy some data. So there's a lot higher technology. There's a lot more different kinds of technology, like wireless, web pads, iPhones, and all sorts of things. And what this means is there's a whole lot of different ways that a criminal can get into a system and steal data or commit various crimes. So the complexity is much higher, and therefore we need to have more powerful tools to detect it. For investigating this kind of cybercrime and various activities, it's very complicated because we have to be able to position where is the potential crime coming from, what's the potential area where, what kind of crime is going on, where the people are perhaps, how they're accessing, how they're getting in. There's issues of tracking and monitoring, and it's very important to be able to track and monitor and capture it near the source. There's the idea of lawful interception, where that we want to intercept certain data and be able to actually track it in real time and then take some sort of action to block it or to arrest or to deter or whatever. And then there's other areas, for example, in terms of interrogation, where that you may have various items like a suspect's notebook or a suspect's mobile phone, and there's information, that basically there's also databases in various places, and so We need to have some kind of tools to be able to go in and analyze this data and try to detect if somebody is doing something strange or something illegal. And then this kind of thing, the traditional investigation is fairly limited, because the traditional investigation is more limited to, did you find a document or something like that? But actually, cybercrime sometimes doesn't leave many traces. And so we have to use more advanced kind of electronic tools to capture those traces and really discover it. Some of the difficulties of investigating cybercrime. Let's talk about some of the key points. First, it's hard to identify the criminal, because the crime may be happening in the U.S., but the criminal may be located in Russia or China or who knows where. Number two, there's a huge amount of data going over the internet in most companies, and it's very, very hard to zero in on that one little piece of email or that one little corrupt thing somewhere that was the cybercrime out of thousands and thousands of other activities that might be very normal. The other area, it's hard to track transnational or international. There are cyber criminals in, for example, Poland that may be hacking systems in the U.S. and stealing credit card information from perhaps Visa or somebody else. They may be spending it in Poland via other companies. So it's very hard to track this kind of international. Again, it takes more sophisticated tools to do that. And then the fourth point is that it's hard to maintain data integrity. There are so many ways that a criminal or even a disgruntled employee or someone can access internal data on a system and compromise the data or cause problems. So it's very important to trace access and be able to detect if a criminal or somebody else is actually accessing certain data they're not supposed to be accessing. Okay. And then the fifth one is it's hard to trace through network routes. There are all kinds of tools that criminals can use to kind of hide their location and kind of block people from finding them. And so, again, it takes some fairly sophisticated software to actually trace the data and see where they're really coming from and really to isolate where's the problem. And then the last point is that there's a lot of anonymous activity or dummy accounts or something like that. For example, a hacker might get access to one of your own employees' login and user information, and they might access as a normal employee. But you may be able to detect that because the activity was in the middle of the night, for example. And if your company is, say, working normal daytime hours, and you see one employee or one person accessing in the middle of the night when the company's closed, well, obviously that's a red flag. And so there are methods that you can identify some anomalies or some anonymous activities that look like they're out of place. There's different investigation processes. For the common crime, there's evidence at the scene. There's financial records, there's witnesses, there's other kind of stuff. And so it's usually more physical. And so it doesn't necessarily require powerful tools. But for cybercrime, that's a different story. For cybercrime, there's a lot of things that are hidden on little records here and there in the computer, but they're not in the places where you could find them easy. They might be in a log somewhere. They might be in some internet record somewhere. And they might not even be recorded. They might not even be kept on the computer. And so in many cases, you don't have any hard evidence. If the criminals are really advanced, they know how to cover the tracks. And so there might not be much of anything that you could actually find and say, okay, this points to John Doe. So what that means is you need more advanced software to do the data collection for the activity on the system, like the network traffic, and collect that key traffic going in and out, and then be able to examine that traffic and look for things like people, for example, copying accounting records or finance records or uploading or downloading or some sorts of things, and to look for those unusual things. So it means you need more powerful tools and you need more powerful methods for cybercrime, because a lot of the data is hidden. A lot of the data is not visible, and sometimes the data is very temporary. It's only there for a short time. So if you didn't have the powerful tool to trace it and collect it and save it, there may be no evidence. And so it requires more high-level tools to actually catch and detect cyber crimes. There's a process flow for cyber investigation. You could say there's some primary data, some sourcing and collection. And so, for example, one of the first steps is we may have tools and special equipment, software, and so on that can collect key network traffic data, for example, and collect this data. And then the second stage is we have to have advanced tools that can dig deeper in this data and look for certain things. For example, like I mentioned, look for maybe an employee in the company who is accessing data at 4 o'clock in the morning when the company is closed at 6 p.m. Or to look for anomalies, like sending large files or maybe certain kinds of activity. We need to be able to get in and search. And so that's the next area, the blue area, further investigation. We can try to detect some anomaly, some unusual thing. Maybe we detect that there's somebody from outside the country who is accessing these systems. And maybe we can analyze further and see where did they come from and what's the data they're accessing and where are they sending it to. And then if we can collect enough of that data, we can trace back and actually identify where they came from, or perhaps, what location they're in, or what network they came through, and eventually trace back. And then the follow-up to that is once we discover this path and there's some sort of a trace, then we can also look and say, are there other patterns that are similar, that are maybe using a similar model, and maybe we can uncover not one, but 2 or 3 or 4 sorts of cybercrime. These are kind of, like you could say, main important areas. There's primary data sourcing and collection. And this is really the important part, because many types of data are transitory. They're only on the system for a little while. And so the cyber criminals, they know that, and so they try to do things without leaving any traces. However, we can use advanced software tools so that we can collect the data in real time and save it and analyze it. And then we have the data that we need later on to figure out if something is going wrong. Okay. The second level, this deeper source collection. Once we have the primary data, for example, network traffic and the packets, we can cross-check those, we can sort them, we can analyze them, and then we can do something to look at the details and see, is there a pattern? Is there something that indicates possible fraud in there? And this is basically not only looking at network traffic, but looking at access and all sorts of things, email and even online social sites and so on. Now, the further investigation stage, for example, in a normal investigation, there's phone record checks, there's all sorts of other kind of tracking, and there's other sorts of data like knowledge of, what people or what organizations or perhaps what locations, IP numbers or something that hacking is coming from. But in terms of online, we can also go deeper and look and say, okay, there's a lot of suspicious, maybe Yahoo Messenger going back and forth. And then maybe there's attachments in the Yahoo Messenger. So we can dig in and look at this in real detail. And then sometimes we can trace back to real individuals and then get the specific evidence and things that's needed. Okay, and then the next step is the suspect's arrest and actually evidence collection. For example, once a suspect is identified and you confiscate their notebook, their phone, and other sorts of things, it also needs some forensic tools to be able to analyze what's on their notebook, their data, and other sorts of things, and try to pull out the details that are not so obvious. If the criminal is really more capable, it won't just be on a regular file. It might be hidden somewhere. It might be, for example, in a file with a password, encrypted. And so it may even require some sorts of tools to crack a code or something like that to unencrypt. And in the follow-up, the final part at the end, once a particular crime is uncovered, then it will basically give you hints and clues to other things to look for. For example, if you found one particular crime was involving MSN Messenger and sending out some sort of interesting reply to certain users, and then they got hooked by a certain thing, obviously we could search other systems and look for that pattern and see if there's others that are maybe even other groups using the same thing, or maybe other computers that have got compromised. What we have is a solution to handle these kind of problems and to help analyze these kinds of problems. And this is a tactical solution to really look at network protocol and to collect it, first of all, in detail, and then analyze it, and then reconstruct it. Now, there's lots of kinds of network protocol. For example, a file transfer, or a website access, or an MSN chat, or perhaps some other program like Talk, or like, for example, Skype or something. So all of these have their own protocols, and we can decode that, and we can reconstruct it, and then we can allow you to search by user, or by computer, or by various categories, and dig in a certain area, and then do this kind of forensic analysis. So this is a powerful tool to first let you sniff the data and collect the data, and then decode it, and then reconstruct it into its original data, and then basically store it for reference, and then allow you to manipulate it, to review it, to browse it, and see actually what's there. So this is a powerful solution to cover all the things we just talked about. Here's a more complicated pattern. In a real company or in a real organization, the actual situation is very complicated. You have systems in various locations. You have servers. You have servers that are handling your corporate applications and so on. You have client systems, both local and remote. And you have some numbers of switches or routers or other types of equipment. And then you're accessing the internet from somewhere. And so then, of course, there's the internet on the side. And then in your organization, you may have NAS systems. You may have all sorts of, like a central management server. You may have lots of different types of networks and access. Now, the solution here is that there are many points in this diagram where data flows back and forth. And what we have is a very powerful analysis solution, eDetective, which can go in and collect the raw data that's going back and forth through the network at various points, and it can collect that into a centralized location or in individual locations, whichever, and then it can allow a security person to go in and review it and analyze it and look for anomalies and verify that there is or isn't any unusual or unlawful activity. And so what this means from a central location, we can manage a lot of the data, and we can detect the problems or the fraud or something like that at a very high level. Not just by looking at a packet and a bunch of bits, but by actually decoding the real data that somebody sent from one place to another. So this is a very powerful solution, and it can be used as kind of a global thing to track all of the data coming through a network, for example, at a high level, at a government level, or it can be used in an organization or in a company to manage all of their data and try to make it more secure. Professional training is a very important topic because we have a very powerful software and very powerful tool, but in order to use it the most effective, it needs professional training. It's a very easy to use tool, and it's very capable, but it's like any powerful tool, it needs some skill in order to use it to its best advantage. So in order to really do cybercrime investigation, we provide some fairly high levels of training to basically teach either the various investigators or experts how to use these tools to their maximum value. They're very powerful tools. You can go in and search a certain kind of situation, or you can monitor a certain situation. But the key is it's very important to have this kind of like a 3-day course or longer if needed to really understand how to do this analysis, how to set up these tools properly, so that you can catch all the data in the first place, and then how you can most effectively browse through it and detect some sort of fraud or some anomalies that need further investigation. We provide a very complete solution, and that complete solution includes not only very advanced security analysis software, eDetective, but we also provide some very experienced consulting and delivery services to help make sure that you can really deploy it in the best way and get maximum value. So we can provide very capable surveillance type systems and some assessment, some deployment plan, and kind of give you the tools and the methods how to do this data analysis and how to do this data mining to pull out those suspicious things that need more investigation. So our philosophy here is extensive training. We train the trainer. For law enforcement officials or prosecutors or administrators, we can go step by step in a small classroom where that everybody can really learn very well, but really hands-on, and make it a very friendly, easy type of training where that people can get a lot of results very fast. And this is very important because if your people are trained and they know how to use the tools very well, then they can be very efficient in pulling out these kind of suspicious things and monitoring, tracking, and discovering these kind of illegal or criminal activities. For the future development and upgrades and things like that, we have a technology update and upgrade plan, and we can provide ongoing training, consulting, and a lot of things to kind of tailor the solution to what your project actually needs. And then one last point on that is that we can provide customization and consulting to integrate our automated solutions with your back-end various lawful interception data analysis systems. So, for example, we can assist your engineers to integrate and connect our data analysis and feed that into your various databases and your various systems and your various databases that kind of collect history and certain key data. And so this is a way to make a very integrated solution and fit into your existing applications and your existing methodology. Now, for general reference, for example, we have applications and projects in security and this sort of cybercrime analysis in many, many countries around the world. Just for example, in Thailand, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, China, and many, many areas, not only in Asia, but many areas in Western Europe, in the U.S., in Africa, and many, many countries. The government and or the large commercial enterprises, there are many, many of these enterprises that rely on our kind of high-level technology to make it very easy to get in and capture this internal data and then analyze this data. And this is the key to detecting and preventing various kinds of system and internet fraud. Okay, for contacting us, you can contact us at decision@decision.com.tw, and the main website is http://edecision4u.com. So edecision4u.com.